Hey guys, this is Jay Friedman. I am an ultra runner in New York in the Hudson Valley region. I'm a member of the Mountain Peak Fitness Red Knit Racing team, and I'm also a running coach. Uh, and I wanted to introduce myself for what I guess Ian is calling Coach's Corner, um, where hopefully is a place where we can kind of talk about some different aspects of running and training and performance and that sort of thing that might be helpful. So one of the things I wanted to talk about today was exercise physiology testing. In my day job, I'm a physician. I'm an emergency medicine physician, and I also have like a little side gig as an exercise physiologist. And I work with a local cardiology group doing exercise physiology testing for both athletes and also people with heart disease and other cardiac issues. But one of my main interest in exercise physiology is for performance and coaching capabilities. And so what I wanted to talk a little bit about today is exercise physiology testing and kind of what it's useful for. When we talk about these tests, we're really talking about tests for a couple of different physiologic parameters. The one that people I think are most familiar with is what's called the Vo2 Max. Also, Lactate Threshold is another one you might have heard of, and running economy is a third parameter that we can look at. So I wanted to go over a little bit just what those things are, what we can, or how we test for them, and why it's useful to have a test that might determine what your different parameters are. So what are the three parameters that we're looking at? And there are others too, but the three main ones I want to touch on. The Vo2 max is the first one and the one that people talk about most commonly. And what your Vo2 max is, it's the V stands for volume and O2 is for oxygen. And it's basically the amount of oxygen that your body can take in and utilize when it's exercising at a maximal level. That's what the max stands for. So it's an interesting test in that it looks at not just your lungs in terms of how much oxygen you can breathe in and get into the bloodstream, but also how well can you utilize it. And so that's going to encompass how efficiently can the heart pump and distribute the oxygen to the exercising tissues, and then how good are the tissues, the muscles, at in terms of extracting that oxygen from the bloodstream and then using it. So it actually hits a couple of different aspects of the cardiovascular system. Some people call this your exercise capacity, and I like to think of it, if you're thinking of the body as a car, you want to think of the Vo2 max as basically the size of your engine. You're running a smaller engine or a large, like a big Mack truck. Basically how high can you rev it, how fast can you burn, or how hot can you burn. And it's a nice marker in terms of overall ability, in terms of your ability to really rev it up to a max level. It's not the be-all and end-all that some people think it is. The Vo2 max, I think, has a reputation for being a determinant of athletic performance. And while it is true that to get to a certain very high level of performance, you're going to need a relatively high Vo2 max, it's not the be-all and end-all that some people think it is. And in fact, it has a large a role to play, but it works in concert with a lot of the other physiologic processes that we look at. The Vo2 max is modifiable by training to some degree, although a lot of your Vo2 max is going to be determined by your genetics. So for most people, there is an upper limit of what they're going to be able to hit on their Vo2 max. Now that doesn't mean that training can't improve in other ways, and one of the ways that we can improve training is by improving your lactate threshold. The lactate threshold is basically the point at which you start to accumulate lactic acid in the bloodstream. And lactic acid, similar to Vo2 max, lactic acid is not the boogeyman that it was made out to be in the early days of exercise science, but it's a useful marker in kind of determining how quickly you're going to fatigue and how sustainable a certain level of activity is. So any sort of activity or exercise above what we call the aerobic threshold is going to produce some lactic acid. And there's a range in which increasing your your work of exercise, or increasing the intensity at which you're working, is going to lead to a fairly steady and predictable rise in lactic acid accumulation. Eventually, as work increases, you're going to get to a point at which lactic acid is going to increase at a much steeper rate than we saw previously. So it's going to be slow and steady and then a much steeper accumulation. And that point where it switches from slow and steady to steep accumulation is what we call the lactate threshold. And knowing where that threshold occurs can be very useful in terms of determining what kind of effort and what intensity of effort is going to be sustainable for longer periods of time. And this is another parameter that's fairly trainable, even much more so than your VO2 max. And improving lactate threshold, increasing the level of intensity at which you're able to exercise before you accumulate lactic acid in a significant amount, is going to increase your performance significantly, particularly in races from the distance of 10K up to a marathon or so. So that's a very important parameter to know and to train to. The third one is what's called the running economy. And running economy is basically, if VO2 max is your engine size, running economy, I tell people that's your gas mileage. Your running economy is how much energy, basically, how much oxygen or how much energy in general are you using at a steady state sub-maximal pace or effort. And for long distance exercisers, cyclists, runners who are going to be exercising for long periods of time well below their maximal level, economy is very important and maybe the most important determinant of performance over the long period of time, because again, these events are going to take place far below your maximum effort and usually below your lactate threshold as well. So the more economic we can make you, the less energy it takes you to run at significant or at submaximal distance intensities for a significant distance, the better your performance is going to be. And that's something else that we can measure in the lab, and also something that we can address with targeted training, be it long, slow distance or threshold running or different kinds of performance modalities. So, there are a bunch of things beyond just the VO2 max that we can tell in the lab. And now these tests are fairly easy to get. They're fairly widespread, and if you need information on where you can get one in our area, certainly come to the lab where I work, and I'm happy to do it, and I can point you to that on my website. And there are certainly, regardless of where you're located, I'm sure it's not going to be terribly difficult to find a lab where you can have these tests done. These tests are fairly short. They usually take between 10 and 20 minutes of running on a treadmill or cycling on a stationary bike, sometimes even on a rowing machine or an erg machine. And it's for people who are interested in the scientific aspect of training and performance, or if you feel like you want a deeper dive into your fitness and your performance. It's an interesting way that we can get some more information and kind of target and modify your training a little bit. Some people go just for once and for a single test, and they get parameters and heart rates at which you can work out in different what we call zones, and that may be very helpful. I actually find it's really helpful when people come back 3 or 6 months later, or even a year later, after they've made some adjustments to their training, and we can remeasure them and see whether or not those adjustments have had the desired effect. And if, let's say your VO2 max was lower before, and maybe now we've improved that with targeted training, but now you want to improve your lactate threshold, we can adjust the training and workouts based on that to target a different physiological system. So that's just a quick primer on exercise physiology and exercise training and testing. If you want some more information, you can check out my website. It's gunksrunner.com, gunksrunner.com/coaching. That's where I have some information on both coaching services and on exercise physiology testing. Or check out my coaching kind of collective, part of the Boundless coaching team. So that's Boundless 10200, BOUNDLESS 10200.com. And you can find out information on our coaching services and nutritional services and stuff there. So everybody stay safe and good luck with training, and hopefully I'll see you out on the trails.